What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric. Today on the channel we're checking out something extremely special and extremely rare. This is one of 25 units made in America, Dean ML Dimebag Concrete Sledge Guitar. This is as close as you can get to Dimebag's original Concrete Sledge Guitar, which is probably one of the most unique Dimebag guitars out of his entire arsenal of guitars that he's played through the years of Pantera and Damageplan. But before we learn any more about this guitar here and the original Concrete Sledge DNML, we're going to hear this guitar in a full demo mix, obviously playing the only song that should ever be played on this guitar here. Let's do this. And that was the Dean USA Concrete Sledge Dimebag guitar in a full demo mix. All of the guitars were recorded using this guitar, obviously with a Bill Lawrence XL500 in the bridge, just as Dimebag would have used throughout his entire career in Pantera, and going straight into the Omega plugin from Neural DSP. Alright, so now let's learn about the original Primal Concrete Sledge guitar and see where it actually came from. And at this point, you're going to see the original Primal Concrete Sledge guitar of where it actually ended up and where it was retired in its final days, and essentially that is what birthed this guitar here. And that's essentially how we knew the guitar, specifically from the Monsters of Moscow performance where Dimebag actually used it to play Primal Concrete Sledge, which is essentially where the guitar got its name from. And not to mention here, the graphic kind of has like this concrete, textured look on the top here with all the grays and the blacks and all everything here. And it looks like all the concrete is kind of breaking away and there's some sort of explosion happening down here with all the reds and the yellows and the oranges. It's so 90s and I love everything about it. And it kind of reminds me of like those old NASCAR shirts that you could actually get from the 90s. They had these big, bright, vibrant colors that were just contrasting against something a little bit more easy, like a gray or a white. And yeah, this thing is just, it's loud and it's in your face. And obviously we know this guitar as it is, but the one thing that I really want to cover is the actual history of the guitar, which we're going to do right now. Now, this guitar started out life as a regular Dean ML guitar that Dimebag would have played throughout his career in Pantera before switching over to Washburn. And I'm going to show the original one on screen right now. You can see it is actually a white Dean ML, and it actually has 24 frets, which is very interesting. Also has a little bit of black binding that goes around the body and maybe parts of the neck and the headstock as well. And because the original Concrete Sledge guitar had body binding, that immediately means that it is a Select series from Dean. And the Select series guitars that Dean offered in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, those were more of the premium guitars. They had the nicer features. Some of them had figured maple tops with regular body binding, and some of them just had body binding with a nice like high gloss paint job and everything like that. And some examples of the Select series that Dimebag would have played would have been his own Far Beyond Driven guitar from 1979. And otherwise, if the guitar did not have body binding from the factory and had like the nice rolled edges like you're seeing on here and the nice body contours, that is going to be the Flame series, because that is a bit more of an affordable design, and that is actually how the Dean from Hell started. And if you want to learn more about that guitar and some other vintage Deans as well, you can check out this video that is linked right up here. Now, another interesting thing about the original Concrete Sledge guitar is that it actually had 24 frets, which is something very unique. I'm not 100% sure of the scale length of the guitar, whether it was 24 3/4 like all the other Deans of the time, or if it was actually 25.5-inch scale. But I've actually seen a lot of other guitars that are 24 3/4 inch scale with 24 frets, so I'm gonna assume that maybe that was a one-off, or maybe one of a limited run or something that they did back in the 80s or something like that. While it is rare, there are guitars with shorter scale lengths with 24 frets that are still being produced today. So now you might be wondering, how did that original guitar turn into this, and especially with a totally different headstock design here? Well, essentially, like a lot of Dimebag's other Dean MLs, a lot of the necks were actually broken on them, whether there was the headstock that broke off or the actual neck that snapped into a couple pieces. So essentially the neck broke off that original Dean for whatever reason, and Grady Champion, Dimebag's longtime guitar tech, and Dimebag got together and they essentially took a neck off of a particular Washburn guitar that had a reverse inline 6 headstock with these reverse shark fin inlays, and they essentially glued that neck into this guitar, which then started the original design for this Concrete Sledge guitar. The guitar was then repainted in this kind of silver sparkly finish, which is actually the same guitar that you could see in the Psycho Holiday video, and it was then repainted after that into what we have here by Rick Dubstat. And you can see on Dimebag's original guitar, just along the side of the body, right by the toggle switch, it actually says it's painted by Rick Dubstat, and that was one of Dimebag's long-term painters who actually painted a lot of Dimebag's custom Dean and Washburn guitars. Essentially, Rick designed this very unique and very cool paint scheme here. And a very interesting thing about the paint and the design of this is that it actually has this kind of black spots and black flecks of paint in the back here of the neck, which actually is supposed to reminisce the design of Concrete, because if you look at Concrete really close, it's not all the same color. You can see little different flecks of black and gray, and it's so cool, and you can really tell that there is so much attention to detail in designing the original finish for this guitar. And it goes without saying, the original Concrete Sledge guitar was extremely heavy from what Dimebag and what Grady has actually told us throughout the years. By the sounds of it, I don't think the original sparkle paint that was seen in the Psycho Holiday video was sanded off and then repainted to give us this. I think it was actually just painted over, because from what I've read and from what I've heard, there was just layers and layers of paint on this guitar, and maybe from the amount of clear coat that was on it. So if Grady or Rick actually sees this video, let me know in the comments below, because I wouldn't mind knowing if the guitar was actually sanded off or anything like that, or if there was actually pictures of the paint process just to see how this guitar came to life, because this is such a unique finish, and it's literally one of a million, because no other guitar is painted like this. Now, a very interesting thing about the original Concrete Sledge guitar is that it had the original Dean specs, mahogany body and mahogany neck and everything like that, and the V-shaped neck. But obviously once that neck was broken, they slapped the Washburn neck on. But the thing is that no one's really talking about the exact model of Washburn guitar that was used as a donor for the neck and the headstock of this guitar to actually make the Primal Concrete Sledge as we know. So after doing a ton of digging online for old 80s and 90s Washburn guitars, essentially there are a handful of guitar models from Washburn from the 80s and the 90s that could have been potential donors for this guitar. I'm going to show them on screen right now. We have the G series, there's the RR series, there's the V series or the SV series and things like that. The very interesting thing about those guitars is that they only have the regular style shark fin inlays, and they only had the regular style headstock. So I'm honestly wondering if maybe there was a certain kind of Washburn guitar that had the reverse shark fin inlays and the reverse headstock in one package, because after doing so much digging, I couldn't really find anything like that. Even looking for lefty versions of those guitars that I just showed on screen, there was pretty well nothing that came up. So if you know the exact model of the guitar that was used for the neck and the headstock of the original Concrete Sledge, let me know in the comments below. Would love to see that one. And another thing too is that the original Washburn neck was a 25.5-inch scale, which is going to be the same same as the Culprit, you know, down the road and everything like that. But even then, compared to Dimebag's other guitars that he had from Dean, those were all 24 and 3/4 inch scale. So it's very interesting knowing the amount of work that probably had to go into making that whole guitar work. It's just very interesting seeing how guitars were kind of thrown together, especially when they were broken, and you get a donor neck from somewhere and you just make it work. Which is very different because a lot of guitar designs are obviously designed out, lots of R&D and, you know, making sure everything is going to be where it has to be. But Dimebag and Grady just threw stuff together and they made it work, and I think that's just such a unique characteristic of that guitar, is that it was thrown together from some different parts, kind of like a Frankenstein in some way, like what Eddie Van Halen did. And as a result of it, it led to being one of the most iconic guitars in metal, because it was just a couple of friends hanging out and trying things and just seeing what worked. And that's essentially the story of how the whole guitar came to life. Obviously, it made its giant claim to fame at the Monsters of Moscow performance in 1991 when Pantera went over to Moscow. And essentially, since the guitar was so heavy, as I said earlier, the guitar was more or less a backup guitar. You could see other clips on YouTube in the early 90s where Dimebag was playing this guitar on other songs as well. And it's hard to say how much studio time this guitar got, because it seemed like the Dean from Hell and the Far Beyond Driven were the mainstays until Dimebag went over to Washburn. But nonetheless, it's an extremely iconic guitar, and it's really amazing that the original Concrete Sledge was then reproduced into a USA and an import variant of the guitar to honor Dimebag's legacy. So now when it came time to release this guitar as a production run for the market and everything like that, this guitar was released in 2 different variants. We have the American one right here. This is one of 25 made in America examples of the Primal Concrete Sledge guitar. There's also a NAMM prototype that's still floating around in the wild, and I think it's still for sale at the time of filming this video. And there was also 333, it's Dimebag's favorite number, models of the import version, which were made in Korea. And essentially, both of those guitars share a lot of similarities with each other. They have a couple differences from each other, which we're going to go over. And ultimately, it is the closest reincarnation of the Concrete Sledge guitar that you can get from the factory. Now, going over the specs of this guitar here, we have a mahogany body, we have a mahogany neck, we also have a rosewood fingerboard, we have the Bill Lawrence XL500 in the bridge, we also have the Dean DMT, this is the Dime Time neck pickup, which is supposed to reminisce like a Seymour Duncan 59 or a DiMarzio Super Distortion. We have the all original Floyd Rose here, 2 volumes, 1 tone. The tone knob has been obviously disconnected because that's how Dime ran all of his guitars. Grady would essentially do that for him. You have the Dimebag traction knobs. That is essentially a Dimebag and Grady original design as well. We also have the reverse shark fin inlays on this guitar as well, which is very cool to see. I really like how it honestly looks, and it's so different than just seeing dot inlays on a traditional Dean ML. We have 24 frets on a 25.5 inch scale, which is very different as I talked about earlier, but that is what the original Concrete Sledge guitar had, as this is a faithful recreation of it. We then have the Dean guitar's headstock here with the Dean logo done up in the same Concrete Sledge paint scheme there. This is essentially Dean's version of an inline 6 headstock. You might have seen this headstock on the Dean VMNT. It's Dave Mustaine's signature when he was with Dean Guitars, but I'm pretty sure they weren't able to get the licensing for that original headstock that Washburn had, which is too bad, because I really think that having a angled reverse headstock like the original one had would have tied this guitar together so well, especially for having this guitar as such a limited production number. It would have been awesome to see this guitar look even more similar to the original than it already does. Keeping with the theme of the neck here, we have a C-shaped profile as well. This is very slim. It's very comfy to play. It's not super thin, maybe like an Ibanez or anything like that. It's a very comfy neck design, but it is a very different change in feel if you're used to the V-shaped neck that comes on pretty well every other USA Dimebag signature guitar. We have the volute here, which is essentially to reinforce the headstock so the headstock doesn't snap off like so many of Dimebag's Dean ML guitars did back in the day. And last but not least, we have the very, very iconic Concrete Sledge finish here. Now this one here is a vinyl graphic that was then put on the guitar, kind of like some of the Razorbacks were. which was kind of unfortunate when I first heard that, because it would have been awesome to see them actually repaint the guitar, because Dean was known for airbrushing and hand painting a lot of their USA guitars, especially with like the Rust Razorback, the Skulls Razorback, and things like that. And it would have been so cool if they actually hand painted these ones, or maybe brought Rick in, you know, as a subcontractor or something to actually paint these Made in America ones. I think that would have made this USA line way more special than it already is, especially when you can bring the original painter in to recreate the original design and everything like that. And that's pretty much it for the Made in America version of the Concrete Sledge Guitar. The Made in Korea version had a lot of the same design choices as the Made in America version, but one real interesting difference between the American and the Made in Korea version is that the sides of the Korean guitar, which I'm going to show on screen right now, they're painted just solid gray, and they are not painted with this kind of like black and little gray flecks of paint here that are on the sides of the American one, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure why Dean did that and why Dean didn't just make all the guitars look the same. Maybe it was to distinguish the two, but I think it's pretty obvious when your guitar says Made in America versus Made in Korea on it. And last but not least, both the American and the Korean production models came with certificates of authenticity, both of them being signed by the late Elliot Rubinson and Vinnie Paul Abbott. When this guitar was announced back in 2012, I was super excited to actually see it get into production and everything like that, because the only time we actually saw this guitar out in the wild was literally with Dimebag. I'm very thankful that it came out, even if there are a couple different design choices that are different from the original. We still have this guitar here, and ultimately this guitar was signed off by the Dimebag estate. It was also signed off by Vinnie Paul, Dimebag's late brother, and it was signed off by the former CEO of Dean Guitars. So if you are looking for one of these guitars, they are extremely limited, especially the USA ones. Those are very, very hard to come by. The Korean ones, they come up every now and then, you know, but as with all of the Dean and Washburn Dimebag guitars, they're getting harder to find every day, so you essentially just have to jump on these things when you get them. And sure, this one might not be a carbon copy of the exact one, but this guitar still captures the spirit and the legacy of Dimebag Darrell, and it recreates one of his most iconic designs in a killer package. And now I'm going to turn it to you. What do you think about the Primal Concrete Sledge Guitar? Is this your favorite Dimebag design here, or do you like something that's a bit more traditional with the 3/3 headstock, the dot inlays, or something that he was playing for most of his career like the Bolt or the Slime designs? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this guitar and the other Dimebag guitars as well. And if you're new here, I have tons more Dimebag content on the channel as well, so go ahead and click that subscribe button if that is your thing. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a thumbs up, because that lets me know that you like the things that I make. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next time.